Welcome, everyone. My name is Alex Elliott. I'm the Senior Manager of Events and Engagement for the Public Programs Department of California Institute of Integral Studies, which is a nonprofit university located in San Francisco. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to On Social Justice and the Enneagram. As many of us are descendants of settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those who were forcefully brought to this continent, we, CIIS Public Programs, must recognize and never forget that our university's building in San Francisco occupies traditional, unceded Ramaytush Ohlone lands. If you're interested in learning more about Native lands, languages, and territories where you live, we encourage you to visit native-lands.ca. Before we get started tonight, I have a couple of general tips and troubleshooting items to go over with all of you. We are going to be having a live Q&A after the conversation tonight for anyone who is joining us live. So please submit your questions at any time using our web form, which is linked in the event description just below this video. Our presenters are going to be pulling questions that were submitted on that form after their portion of the event, and we'll try to get through as many as we have time for. We do have automatically generated captions for this event, which you can toggle on and off using the closed captioning button in YouTube. If you're having any issues with your audio or video, we always suggest that you first reload the page. And then if you're still having issues, it can help to adjust your video settings or lower your video quality within YouTube. Now let me first introduce our presenters, Micky and Dr. Egerton, and then we will get right to their conversation. Micky ScottBey Jones is a womanist, multi-faith movement chaplain, writer, innovative certified accredited Enneagram teacher, transformative leadership coach, compassionate facilitator, and nonviolence practitioner. Micky is the author of Keep the Fires Burning, Conquering Stress and Burnout as a Mother-Baby Professional, a contributing author in Becoming Like Creoles, Living and Leading at the Intersections of Justice, Culture and Religion, Keep Watch with Me, an Advent reader for peacemakers, and Holding Change, the way of emergent strategy and facilitation and mediation, and has contributed to the Journal of NAIITS, an Indigenous learning community, and the Oneing Journal through the Center for Action and Contemplation. Her writing has been featured on many platforms, and she's a sought-after guest on many podcasts. Micky is also a regular co-host on the podcast Bruce Ray's Chow and Friends. Dr. Deborah Egerton is an internationally respected spiritual teacher, an IEA certified Enneagram practitioner, and a consultant and coach. Dr. E, as she is affectionately referred to, is the founder and president of Trinity Transition Consultants, LLC. For over 2 decades, the focus of her work has been teaching the Enneagram as a valuable tool for social justice and anti-racism, and using it as a blueprint to reunite people. Her visionary approach to inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism work expands the traditional scope of the DEI method and allows for the honoring of every individual with respect to all dimensions of their unique self-identification. She's a current board member of the International Enneagram Association, and her greatest passion is leading others to understand their own humanity. And now it is my absolute pleasure to turn it over to Micky and Dr. Egerton.
Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you are here with us tonight. And I just have to start by first thanking Alex and the team that is putting this together for inviting me to be a part of this conversation with a mentor of mine. And Dr. E, you know this, but I want to make sure everyone else knows that you are a mentor. And I look at you as kind of a mama bear for a lot of us younger, and I say younger in quotes because we're not all that young. We're just maybe the next generation of Enneagram teachers and coaches and practitioners. And so many of us, especially those that are Black, Indigenous, Latinx, like all people of color, marginalized teachers, so many of us are privileged to know you and to be taken under your wing. And so I'm just grateful that other people get to be introduced to you tonight and even know you in that capacity, right? That you are pouring into that next generation because you are really a legacy teacher. You know,
Yes.
we so often only include maybe the older white male and female teachers, sometimes even the women, but you know, that's who's included as the legacy Enneagram teachers. So this is a for people to be able to hear your wisdom and not just the standard Enneagram teachings, but we are really getting to talk about something that you've been a pioneer in, which is the Enneagram and social justice. So thank you so much for the role you have in my life and the role that you are playing tonight by teaching so many about your work.
Well, Micky, thank you so much for that. And yes, you know, I think of you as a daughter, and I love you dearly. So I
Yeah.
couldn't be happier than to be doing this with you and recognizing that as I look at that next generation that I am working to pass this work on to, looking at the caliber of human beings who are graciously not only accepting it, but doing the things with it that need to be done in order to innovate and elevate and move the work forward. And to me, that is powerful. I know that there are shoulders that I stand on, that I would not be able to have done what I do now without the wisdom teachers and the legacy teachers that I had. And, you know, to be very, very honest and clear about this, I came along in a time where I was growing up when Martin Luther King was leading the civil rights movement, when Malcolm X was assassinated, when all of our great leaders were assassinated, when all of these things were happening, I was actually alive and old enough to understand some of it and to begin to study it and to look at it through a lens that helped me recognize that people were being treated differently, people were being marginalized, and that we would have to learn how to continue to move forward even when some of our greatest leaders were struck down. So this has been the work of my life and of my heart. It is my purpose and my passion. And when I found the Enneagram, it was really, and I don't censor my language, I'm a woman of faith. And to me, it was God's gift to say, here's something that I'm giving to you to be able to make this work more understandable to people in the world so that you can actually be a force and a vessel for bringing people together. You know, when we can understand one another, then we can get to those next steps. But without communication and understanding, we will never get to acceptance and inclusion. And we got stuck, Micky, at tolerance. Tolerance is a word that makes my, you know, just literally makes my hair stand on end, because when we got to tolerance, so many thought that was it, you know, that was the panacea.
Yeah.
But tolerance was simply one step, and tolerance is not inclusion. Tolerance is not acceptance. It's certainly not belonging or celebration. So, you know, these are some things that we'll be talking about. And like I said, I'm so delighted with the generation that will carry this on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love it. You're jumping right in, but let's roll it back just a little bit for folks who are joining us that might not know what the Enneagram is at all. So I would love for you to just explain a little bit about the Enneagram. And then, you know, I know that you talk about this in the term of waking up. So give us a little bit on Enneagram and how you wake up in general and then to social justice.
So the Enneagram is actually, the symbol is an ancient symbol of 9 different personality archetypes. And I want to make it clear because sometimes people get very confused when they talk about how old the Enneagram is. The symbol is very old. It predates Plato. We don't know where its true origin comes from. And I can share that I just came back from Egypt, spending a month over there, tracing the roots of the Enneagram and looking at ancient civilizations and looking at just ways that it appeared even back during the times of the ancient Egyptians. But the typology of personality came over to the Western world. We started looking at that more or less in the 80s. And we began to see how some of the founding fathers of the Enneagram were able to create a typology of personality. So we have this ancient spiritual wisdom, and then we also have modern psychology combining to create the Enneagram as we know it today. I could say a lot more about that, but I don't think that's the best use of our time. The 9 different points on the Enneagram represent, in my words, it's 9 different energies. And at each of these points, there is a very strong energy that we embody as individuals. Now, we have all 9 of those points of energy within us, but one of them leads. And the important part of learning how to understand and embrace the Enneagram is to recognize that the point that dominates or that leads within you is really the place where you get stuck. And a lot of people like to talk, they'll say, well, I don't want to be typed. Don't put me in a box. I don't even like to use the word Enneagram type. I talk about it more as the 9 different points and the point where you stand. But really what the Enneagram does is it helps you to see where you're stuck and what the box is that you're trapped in that you haven't yet learned how to get yourself out of.
That's
So
right.
the study of the Enneagram is, and I laugh about this, for many years when I actively practiced as a psychotherapist, I would tell people, that they needed to do their inner work. And if I had $1 for every time someone said, what is inner work?
Yeah.
But the Enneagram helps you to understand what inner work is and how to do it. It's picking up a mirror and really looking beyond your superficial image, but really looking at the depth of your own soul. And to me, the Enneagram gives you an opportunity to touch your soul, and you will go as far with your inner work as you are willing and as deep as you are willing to go to touch your own soul. So Enneagram is just an amazing and beautiful way to see yourself through the eyes of God. And when we do, we learn that we are lovable, that we are whole, that we are not broken, and that the wounded parts of us are capable and we have the capacity to heal. But you can't heal until you look at your own wounds. And the Enneagram helps you.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you're using God language, but I think, both of us approach the Enneagram in a way where, whatever God, universe, spirit, whatever it is for you, the Enneagram isn't attached to any religion or belief system, and some of us are introduced to it that way. We are introduced to it through faith communities or through certain people. And then there's confusion about, is it attached to a particular tradition? And I know you don't teach it that way. Some people they might attach their own spiritual tradition to it. But I know you've worked with people all over the world. coming from lots of different backgrounds.
Absolutely. And I will say that something that I share with people all the time, I'm clear about my own path on the Enneagram. However, there are different ways that you enter into the Enneagram world. And it's
That's
really
right.
funny, like I said, over these past, 2.5 decades now of working with the Enneagram, I have seen people in the corporate world
Yeah.
come into the Enneagram, and it's all about team building, and it's all about learning how to become a better leader or to be promoted within the organization. And that's the lane that maybe corporate wants me to stay in with them, and I can stay there. But what always happens is that there are a few people that will end up following me over to another path, and then they'll become more curious about spiritual path of the Enneagram. And then there
Yeah.
are others that are just interested in sort of the psychological components of the Enneagram. So there's many, many ways to enter it. And whichever door you choose as an entryway, what actually happens is that the Enneagram is going to be as useful to you as you allow yourself to go on the deep dive. So the door that
Yeah.
you enter through really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I love that because I think now with it becoming so popular and there's just, memes online, we can really get caught up in, well, they're not doing true Enneagram or they're not, like, I don't even care if somebody gets their type wrong, quote unquote.
Mhm.
Station, you know, and, you know, you might end up with the wrong page on the map at first. And that's okay. You flip to the next page.
That's right.
Somebody starts with the wrong quote unquote number as their map, that's fine. They'll get there eventually. It's gonna be
Absolutely.
fine. Everybody calm down.
Yeah. Well, what I love about that is that if in fact you start out, and as I say to people, you may have gotten into the right neighborhood, but you may not have found your house,
Yeah,
So, just kind of keep searching. And an important part of that is that even if the point of the Enneagram that you initially invest in is not your point, and you find that out later, you've learned a lot about one of the other points on the Enneagram that
that's
happens
right.
to be inside of you and that will help you to relate and connect to other people. So there is no amount of time that you put into the Enneagram that is useless
That's
because
right.
you have all 9 of those energies within you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Micky, it's so powerful to be able to meet someone's energy because you understand what's operating behind,
Yeah.
that whole egoic agenda. You understand that. So that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had the experience of being kind of mistyped or mistyping myself at first because and this is kind of getting into the social justice part and I want to kind of transition us there. But, you know, my friends that I was discovering the Enneagram with, they're like, oh, you must be an 8, And of course they're thinking this is a Black woman. She's assertive and she says what she means. And she, walks into a room and she commands attention and she's a leader. And so that got me labeled as an 8. And it was reading Richard Rohr's description of a type 1, particularly around the inner critic, that I mean, I must have just had just salty drops on that page when I started reading that because the tears, the like immediate understanding of what was actually happening. But no one had ever talked about the inner critic. When they were describing me, they were only because they were observing my actions. They didn't have access to my inner world, right? And so that really broke me open, seeing that there was another thing that I could consider and really start to do that inner work. But that time wasn't wasted thinking I was an 8 or that I
No.
led with an 8, you know?
And I have a similar story because also I stand at point 1 on the Enneagram, and I'm a Black woman, and obviously I'm an activist. And of course, everyone said, you must be an 8. No, I'm not an 8. But for me, the recognition came very sudden. It came immediately and it came hard. And I share this with people because sometimes finding your point on the Enneagram can be an uncomfortable experience. And for
Sure.
me, when I first found my point at point 1, I curled up in a little ball and I just cried. I just cried. And it was, no, my intention in moving through the world is to make things better, to help
Yeah.
people fix things. And I could see all the ways that I might have been trying to help or to fix where I may have done harm.
Yeah.
So I immediately had to move into that mode of healing myself and then being able to go out into the world and doing the social justice work, because what I do know is that for communities that are marginalized, we don't always have access to the tools or the mechanisms of change and healing that are pretty ubiquitous. But if we don't have the open access, if we don't have the resources, and the resources include time, if you're
That's
working
right.
3 jobs and taking care of several children, and you're involved in their activities, your job, keeping your home together, doing all the things and wearing all the hats that you have to wear in the world, and there's still not enough money to go around at the end of the day, this sounds like it might be a luxury. This sounds like it might be something that you can't afford to do, but that's
That's
not
right.
true. It's not true. And Micky, you and I
Right.
are people who are working to make the Enneagram more accessible in the world so that particularly people who are marginalized, who are, as I call us, love warriors, that we will have access, open access to mechanisms that will allow us to heal. And we need that. We really need that.
Yes. That's really part of my motivation of becoming an Enneagram teacher, becoming certified, becoming accredited. I wanted to provide, not that you can't learn the Enneagram from anybody, you can, but there are a lot of trust issues, right? And with things that seem like they are primarily for one type of person. And I know the way it's changed my life. And I wanted us to have more access. I really did. And so for me, as a Black woman, as a queer woman, and just I wanted to make sure that there were more teachers that look like me out there, and that we could, that you don't, your only option isn't going away to San to sit in a circle and explore yourself. Like, that's not accessible to a lot of people.
No.
So how can we do this in a different way that it's actually incorporated into your life? So let's talk a little bit about how you break it down in the book, that each type kind of has their own work to do, their own gifts, maybe even superpowers to bring to the work of social change. And you kind of start with the 3 centers and 3 categories built around those centers, and then go into the types. So I know we can't go in depth into all the types, but maybe you could start with the centers and a little bit about sort of those, what's different for each point.
Yeah. I can do the, the 60,000 foot view and just pique the curiosity of our audience. But we have three centers of intelligence. We have a body center, a heart center, and a head center. And probably one of the most powerful things that I learned, later on in the Enneagram, when I recognized that the body, not only does it keep score, shout out to an amazing author, but the body has a wisdom all its own. And there are three types that are in what we call the body center or the gut, sort of like that intuitive wisdom that rises up from your belly. It's that thing that happens, Micky, when you know your kids are not where you told them to be. and like, no, something's not right here. You don't know how you know that, but that is kind of gut wisdom, that intuitive, our grandmothers used to call it, mother's wit, women's intuition, all of those things. We all have it. We all have that sort of belly-based knowing without knowing. And within that center right there is the 8, the 9, and the 1, or in the belly center. And what I call 8s, 9s, and 1s are defenders. Defenders, all right? These are the people who their energy is to kind of get out in front of things or get in the middle of things, even when they don't necessarily want to, because the 8 will get right out in front and well, we'll call you out. We'll absolutely have no problem with saying, this is messed up. This is just wrong. All right. So the 8 has that kind of superpower to call it and tell it like it is. The 9, who is also in the belly center, it's fascinating because 9s don't like conflict. But in the social change work, what begins to happen at point 9 is there is a sort of leaning back and watching all the chaos and confusion, and then synthesizing, bringing it together in a way where all the thoughts that have been expressed, have been listened to, have been heard, have been processed through the mind of the 1, and it's really processed through the gut, where it's gut with this wisdom, and then the 9 will come back with a very simple solution that everyone can turn around and go, yeah, wow.
Oh yeah.
Work. That would work, that's a superpower that is so needed when people are trying to get out there and figure out, what to do, and then they're clashing. But 9s, even not liking conflict, are brilliant mediators. And it's amazing if you ever watch a 9 do that. And then there's you and me, Micky, there's the 1s, we are not going to sit around and watch something that is broken and not working for the good of humanity and just sit on our thumbs. We're not going to do that. We're going to speak truth to power. We're going to organize and activate and actually go out and be the defenders of all who need to be defended. And something that I love about the energy of the defenders is that there is a sort of universal goodness in the way of, oh, wow, you're marginalized and so are you, and so are you. Okay, we're all love warriors. Let's get together and figure out how we work together and help each other. And I've seen that frequently in the defenders, which is a lovely thing to have happen. Once you're in the fight, you're in the fight, so let's get in this and let's figure out how we can do it together. So that's the energy of the belly center.
Yeah. And you know what, Dr. E, that's fascinating because that you said we kind of get together and do this. I will hear people, we have our stereotypes of different types. I will hear other people of other types or other points talk about having trouble with eights. And I love them. I have no trouble because I understand their energy and I'm not intimidated by it. They're big old teddy bears.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me at all. You can stomp your feet all you want. I'm not scared.
No.
So it's an interesting, but also I really enjoy, what tends to be a more that observing laid back vibe of a 9. Like there's something all about, even though we have very different expressions of that body energy.
Mm.
It to me, there's some understanding there within this grouping that it just works.
Yeah, and it's an amazing understanding. I've been married to a 9 for 42 years. So as much as I know 1, I know 9 as well. And I have watched the 9s around me and, cohabitated with a very loving 9. And I just understand the inner workings of how for 9s, there is this really important thing that the other 8 types do not share. When the other 8 types actually try to engage to do social change work, there is an agenda of some sort. There is something that each point on the Enneagram really is trying to achieve. The 9 is trying to achieve peace. So there's not this underground sort of personal agenda. That's why 9s are so good at bringing us together, because their underlying agenda is, how do we get to peace? How do we actually move forward together? So those are the defenders. And 8, 9, and 1, just look at the superpower that you have. The voice of the 8 and the action of the 8, the peacemaking and bringing together ability of the 9, and the sort of fearless activation of the 1 to do the right thing and to do the right thing for all. But then, if you have just that energy that you're running off of, you can burn yourself out, which is why we need the energy of the heart, which is where we find our healers, the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s. And people who stand at point 2 are amazing in social change work, because at the end of the day, the need to give and receive love comes from, in this work, a place of wanting people to be healed and to be well and to feel love and to be able to give love back. So at point 2, that is just so just, it's in the very air that 2s breathe. And the superpower of the 2 really is getting in it and taking care of all of the people who are in the struggle, keeping their finger on the pulse of the individuals that are going out into the world doing this work. Just being there and knowing, I can't tell you how many times the 2s on my team have said, Dr. E, we can't do that. That's too many things in one day. And no, it's too much of an agenda. You're going to kill those people.
Yeah.
I listen to them because I know their finger is on the pulse of the people that we're working with.
Yeah, what they need.
Absolutely. Now our 3s, gotta love a 3. If there's an obstacle in the path, if there's something that we need to literally move out of the way and it's too heavy to lift, the 3s that have engaged in this work will come back and say, we can get around that. Let me tell you how,
Yeah.
So there's a resourcefulness that keeps the defenders from burning out, because when we get to a place and we feel like we're at a wall that we just can't knock down, if we didn't have the twos looking out for us, and if we didn't have the threes coming up with the resourceful ways or the connections or knowing the people to be able to help us get around an obstacle, it wouldn't go forward. And so that's the superpower that I see, and the gift that threes bring to social change and social justice. And then the fours. I love this particular descriptor, and I always give Russ Hudson credit for it, because when he said these words one time at a training early on, he said the fours are the holders of the beauty in the world. And it totally transformed the way that I viewed fours. So the superpower and the gift that the fours have to bring to this work is really their capacity to be in it with you with empathy and love, and without the judgment. You know, it's just being with you, understanding that there's a lot of suffering in this type of work, and not everyone can deal with the suffering. But a four can deal with the suffering, and at the same time stand right by your side and let you know that, you know what, you're not going to fall over and die. I got you.
Yeah.
You know, that's an amazing gift. They're not trying to fix you. They're not trying to make you better. They're just there with you, saying, I got you, and we can bear this. We can bear this.
That's
I'll
right.
use an example of that, which was with this last video of Nichols, right before I was on my Mr. Nichols. And you know, I can't bring myself to even say the name, because I still haven't healed from that. And I was leaving the country, and I had a conversation with a very dear friend who was a four, and she said to me, she said, Deborah, I called you because I was thinking of you when I watched this, and I know it hurt your heart. And she said, I don't want you to feel like all the work that you're doing is in vain. We know that it's going to get better, and I just want to be here for you just in case you need to talk. You know, not trying to fix me, not trying to justify or, you know, get into a deep discussion, but just letting me know that there was a presence there that was there for me if I needed just to sit in silence with her. And that is something that fours offer that is very much needed, because there are points in time, Micky, when we need that. We can't talk about it. We don't want to see it anymore. We just need a moment to take a breath, and a four will breathe with you. Well, absolutely.
The way I think about it, Dr. E, is that, being at point one, we have access to that four energy, that four power. So I know when I'm in that four power, because a four, not only will they sit in the sackcloth and ashes with you, they will go get some more ashes and be like, I got this. I can handle some more. Let's do it. Bring it to me. Like they are in it.
I know. Well, it's funny because I know with my line to four, and I don't want to get too deep into that because we're kind of staying at a level where everyone can understand. But there are connections to different points, and at one we have a connection to four. And so my four pity parties are particularly pitiful. I mean, when I get down there, I'm not finished until I have wallowed completely on the ground. you know?
Yeah.
And then if I
Yeah.
realize that there's nobody around to witness this, I may move myself to a room in the house where I can be heard sobbing. So when I go
Mine
to,
is that I just say I'll do whatever I have to do, but I'm gonna have to cry about it first. But
yeah,
then it's fine.
then it's okay. It's okay.
Yes.
But yes, and at the same time, because ones and fours really understand each other at a very deep level, sometimes I'll have to turn around to my fourth friend and say, don't get caught up in the overwhelm of all of this. I'm going to be
Yeah.
okay, So it's kind of taking care of each other. But those are the 2, the 3, and the 4 in the heart center, but in 3 very different ways.
Very
You know,
different.
Three
Very
very
different.
different ways, but each of them has that superpower. And then when we
Yeah.
go up to our head center, we have the 5s, the 6, and the 7. And I call the head center types bridge builders because they're the types that have the energy to sort of develop the plan, to figure it out, to look at all that we're trying to do and to, just kind of, to use the vernacular, come correct and be on point.
Yeah.
There's just a beautiful way of the way we know that 5s can see the big picture of things. And so we'll look at the historical evolution of something so that we don't make the wrong moves in the present because we haven't taken in the facts from the past. And then looking
Yeah.
at how what we do in the present will actually affect the trajectory of what we're trying to achieve in the future. No one does that like a 5. So at
Mhm.
5, this is a beautiful thing to watch happen. The taking in of the whole picture. At point 6, the bridge building comes making sure that everything is taken into consideration to make sure that the plan is executable. So 6s help us to know what moves to make when. I've always said if there was ever a natural disaster, I want to know where all my 6 friends live.
Yeah.
Because they're going to know the escape routes, the evacuation places, all the things that, and the supplies are already going to be in the trunk of their car. And if we can't
That's
use
right.
cars, they've got enough bicycles for us to all get out of town. But the 6s will, being prone to that worst case scenario thinking and having a committee in their heads are so vital to the actions that we take and the plans that we make, because they help us not to make a lot of mistakes, not to lose a lot of time, because it hasn't been well
Mhm.
thought out. 6s are just undeniably adept at being able to make sure and to look over any plans about doing something, particularly, in a social justice movement, just calling out what's missing, who's missing, and what to
Yeah.
do. And then when we come to point 7, I always laugh by the time I get finished talking about all the other types. I'm praying that there's still a couple of 7s left in the room. I'm just hoping they haven't all left, but this work does have a weight to it. There is a heaviness to it, a serious nature to it that can sometimes just weigh you down. And
Mhm.
what I have found in looking at how the 7s are the bridge builders is because the 7s enter with an energy of positive expectation, of being able to lift you up and sometimes just make you laugh when you need to, of innovation. You know, you all are trying to do it this way, but actually this is 2023. You know, it would be much better if we actually released several reels or TikToks or whatever it is that needs to be done. There's an innovation to whatever plans are created that just makes it better and makes us better. I've worked on a few teams where the 7 energy was lacking, and the work became so serious and heavy laden that in those organizations, I was really very grateful when some 7 stepped up and joined the team effort. And the whole energy and effort lifted. It just kind of lifted.
Yeah.
I think you know, of course, that 7s are often our first responders in natural disasters, because of the sort of the adrenaline. They want to be helpful. They want to be there where the action is. They can get in and get out without getting too caught up in it, but doing what they need to do that is very helpful and useful at the time. So
Yeah.
that shows you how every single one of the Enneagram energies has a gift, a superpower, something that they can bring to actually, as I say it, really lean on that moral arc to bend it towards justice. We can do that together, but we need all 9 of those energies.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I will say in the book, I forgot to hold up earlier, I do have right here so people can see what it looks like. You go into the whole story, the whole picture, right? Kind of maybe our struggles, the you know, things that are in our, you know, energies at each point that can get in our way, and then what these superpowers are as well. And I think sometimes when people come to Enneagram work, they just dive right into what's wrong with them, or, you know, it's like people will say, oh, you know your type when you find the type that makes you feel the worst about yourself. And I don't love that personally, because especially for historically marginalized folks, I'm like, we are already told to feel bad about ourselves. Like, we are pathology, we are often, right? And so we're already trying to decolonize from what the mainstream has told us we are. So how about we actually start to look at what's good in us, what's right in us, you know? And so again, my energy showing up there, but I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of looking at our assets, you know? And so I think about that, and going back to the builders, I think maybe, and I would love your take on this, I think sometimes they're the ones people don't think of as leaders in social change work. Like, we can kind of see where, 8s, 9s, and 1s, where that energy is forceful. They're going to be out front. 2s, 3s, and 4s, that heart. So they're going to help with preparing and loving on people, and that we can kind of see that. But I really see where, I don't know if it's still around, but there was for a while this thing called Data for Black Lives. And it was literally people who got together, they had conferences, all of these things, pulling together all the data on what's happening in our social change movements. That, like, not saying all those people were 5s, but like, that's 5 energy right there, hardcore, and like 6s, like you're saying, planning. I mean, those are those people who are really scenes work and asking the questions that keep us safe. Maybe those are our safety teams when we go out, and like, that's where maybe a 6 would plug in, is on the safety team during a protest. And 7s, yes, that like lovely energy around fun, but also if you want somebody to help you come up with every possible idea for what you could do, then
they get it
and tell them to dream big, and you will get every idea on the planet, and you'll get the puppets and the we're also going to scale a wall at the same time, and we're also form a chain around the building. We're going to do all the things at once.
It's funny, Micky, because that's one of the reasons that in the book, I give live examples of what each point looks like when they are in the process. And I use the umbrella term of othering, because that's what it is when people are treating any group as less than. So this whole process of othering that people have practiced from the beginning of time, we've always found someone who will be lower than you are, so that you can feel better about yourself. And it's a pretty crappy thing to do, but it's real and it's lifelong. And we can see no end to it in the present tense. But when people are actively othering, we can see that, we can recognize that, because it's right out there in front. In the last question, you talked about waking up. The part of the world that will never wake up is very large. And this is an area that I focus on in the book. All of the ways that each point of the Enneagram engages in passive othering. In other words, not doing anything to make anything better. And in fact, by not doing anything, making things worse. So it's examples of looking at what it looks like when someone is actively othering, which we can say, white supremacist group, that's active. You understand that. People who are anti-Semitic, it's active. You can understand that. But when people are passively othering, where they just don't want to talk about it, or that has nothing to do with me, or do I look like I had slaves? I didn't have slaves, so I don't understand why I should even have to engage this conversation. That kind of putting on the blinders and not being willing to engage in what's actually happening in the present. This is one of the most important parts of doing the work that we have to look at now. Being in our bodies, opening up our heart space, and being willing to release false narratives, to unlearn some things and relearn some things, so that we can actually do the work, the real work of disassembling systemic, patriarchal, and norms that have really taken so many of us and put us out on the margins of society. But if we don't do that real work, then things don't change. So we want to actually get more people to move into the category of allies and advocates. And one of the most important points around being an ally is you don't get to call yourself an ally. You have to be willing to work with the people who are being treated as less than, who are marginalized love warriors. And when we identify people as allies, then you know that you're doing that work. You're doing the work of an ally. But we have a lot of people in the category of passive othering who say that they're allies. The actions of an ally are visible. They're visible, and this is something that is really important. So I think the examples help people to see what the actions are of people who embody each of those dominant energies and what it looks like when they're doing that work in social change, social justice.
Yeah. And I think confusion around like whose work this is to do, and I think anybody who's watching something like this, who's participating in something like this, you have places of privilege and maybe places of marginalization. Most of us are going to have some, especially because all of us are going to get old.
Mhm.
All of our bodies will break down, right? So even if you are, kind of the top of the ladder now, at some point, older and frailer, and we, as a society, discriminate against that as well. So we all have work to do because we're all in, a mix of place of privilege and marginalization. I think about me as, just as a Black woman. I come from, I think I'm third generation college on both sides. My one side, the other side more working class, but that there are some areas of privilege there that I notice, particularly if I am interacting with, poorer people. I'm like, oh, it's very clear that I have had things like summer camp and college education and a master's, and right. So it's like that is a place where I need to understand what it's really like. Immense poverty. It's just not. I've had times when I've been poor, but I don't understand that in the same way. And that is a place where I have privilege, right? I'm queer, but I'm a cis woman. I do not know what it's like to be a trans person.
Right.
And that is a place of deeper marginalization. And I need to learn and understand from that. And I think one of the tools that helps people in your book is the
Humanity.
right. I feel like that's
humanity.
everybody loves it. Could you tell people about that?
So the humanity mosaic is to explain to you that it's sort of it came from a place of not being able to identify with this imagery of living in a melting pot. And that's what I was taught growing up, that particularly the United States was a melting pot, and now the world is becoming a melting pot. Well, a melting pot is something where we all jump in it and we all just sort of stir around, and then the image didn't work for me. It's like, no, I'm not jumping in the melting pot. No, you can do that if you want to, but me, I gotta be me, okay? And so, what I love about the world is the deep, rich, exciting, interesting diversity of each and every one of us, and my superpower is love. It's true love for humanity. And so, if someone said to me, what is your mission? My mission is to heal humanity in whatever way possible. But I want humanity to be able to stand out as a mosaic where each and every one of us, we are bright, shiny jewels in this mosaic of differences. And that when we stand back and we look at the mosaic of humanity, it's just awe-inspiring. It's awe-inspiring. Our differences are beautiful. Our differences are things that we should be able to actually have appreciative curiosity about, wanting to know more, wanting to learn more about one another and how we navigate the world based on where we come from in the world. And in the mosaic, what I show is, it looks like a big brain, and then you see all these different tiles. But that ring, that very first ring in the center, I have, your sort of the Enneagram point is right there in the center. And then around that are all the things that you didn't get to choose that created Micky. All the things that you didn't get to go to the front of the line and say, excuse me, but could you make me a little bit taller? If I could have gone to the front of the line, I would have said, all right, I want to be a little bit taller. And I don't want to be born until about 1980. That'd be good. And by the way, can I have some athletic ability, or at least some athletic knowledge, so I know the difference between a football and a soccer. I'm terrible. I am
None of
terrible.
it. Okay.
None of it. But when you look at all of the things that people are actually penalized, judged, and stereotyped on, it's the things that they didn't choose. The things that were given to us as gifts from the divine, the creator, the universe, however you look at it. But we did not put ourselves together. We didn't do that. And then we're here and we judge each other and we treat each other sometimes terribly based on that. And recognizing that the package that you live in often determines what's going to, what is going to happen in your life. If you were born to parents who were wealthy, you probably got to go to decent schools. If you were born to parents who were poor, you didn't. There's so many variables there that, I would have to tell people, just buy the book and read it, because it's really deep and rich, and it helps you to really think and to feel into the reality of each individual's privilege. Now, I do want to stop for a moment with that word privilege, because I unpack that for people. And particularly as a one, I always say, I can be right, or I can take the time to actually help you shift your heart. And people hear the language, white privilege, the defenses go up. Because when people hear white privilege, what is often heard is, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth and you never worked a day for anything you have. Somebody said that to me, my defenses would go up, okay? Because I've worked hard and I do have privilege, as do you, as does any person that we can look at in some way, shape, or form. They may have something that someone else does not have. But I call that an automatic advantage, so that people can understand that what is meant in this context when we talk about privilege is advantages that you were born into. For instance, if you were born with white skin as opposed to black skin, you have more advantages when you're trying to navigate through the obstacles of the world. You don't have to fight for everything that should be a right for you to have. So the navigation of the world is easier for you if your skin is white than if your skin is black. Do people, is Elon Musk, it's his children, will they have more sort of material advantages than our children do? Well, probably, because he can buy them anything, buy them a rocket ship and take them to the moon if this all blows. But it's understanding the context behind privilege. It's what can you access that someone else gets stopped at the door because the color of their skin, or the way they worship, or how they identify in terms of gender identity. That's an automatic advantage to be cisgendered, white, to be Christian in this country. We can the whole list of what the dominant norms are. And so I spend a lot of time on that in the book, because I want people to understand deeply. You'll never stay the course on doing this type of work if you don't take it in, not just here, but you have to understand it. It has to touch your heart in a way where you recognize, ouch, I never thought about the fact that Deborah Egerton wouldn't have the life that she has had it not been for my father having worked for a short time for the railroads, and therefore he could get a mortgage at a bank when other Black people could not. You know, and it's deep, Micky. It's deep.
Yeah.
Many people don't want to go that deep, but if you look
Yeah.
at it, yeah, it makes a difference.
And you have the book, but you also teach this in courses. I know you have, cohorts. You take people through this if they want to go deeper for themselves or they want to become practitioners of your work.
Right.
And we can maybe talk about a little bit about that when we wrap. I would love for you to tell people about what, ways they can work with you or find you or learn more of your frameworks and all of that. But I want to move us into questions and answers because we have some questions that people have sent in. And as we transition, I also wanted to just offer this Bell Hooks quote because this reminded me of what you were saying about like difference, right? And what we attach to difference. And she said, if we want a beloved community, we must stand for justice, have recognition, difference to privilege. And it's like, I actually love difference. I love diversity, like you love it.
Yeah.
Not everybody shares that same sentiment, but it's like, if you know that, if you have a commitment to at least diversity, now how are we going to move forward into making sure that diversity doesn't assign privilege to certain types of people? So
Correct.
I think that's what we're trying to do here. So let's get to the first one. And this question is from several members of the audience, a social 8 and a 9. Okay, so we got some folks who are doing their Enneagram work. What actions can I take to avoid burnout to last the distance as a social justice advocate? If a 9 or any defender is in the burnout zone, how do we recover?
Wonderful question. Oh, so 8s, 9s, and 1s, we are very likely to burn out because we push very hard. And what has happened usually when we burn out is that we enter the work with wounds that we have not healed. What I always recommend that people do is that you actually look at your own woundedness. In other words, it's very difficult to sustain an effort towards helping other people when you haven't built up your own core strength, when you haven't healed emotionally. And what's fascinating, because I do teach, I like small cohorts of people. I'll have people go all the way back into looking at their history and their ancestry and coming forward and looking at what you are carrying. So many of us are carrying things that we don't even recognize. And those things have left us weakened before we even enter the battle. So what do? You stop, you take a time out, you look for where you are wounded. And that requires doing some of the inner work. I put exercises in the book for people to do that. And it's important to do that because without healing yourself, hurt people hurt people. It's not intentional. It is not for sometimes a lack of good intention, but when you get triggered by something that is wounded in you that you didn't even recognize was there, you're either going to hurt someone else or you're going to burn out completely. So my advice is take a breath, start doing some inner work, look at your own wounds, look at whether or not this is a period of time where you need a timeout for yourself, and then come back into the love battle and bring yourself back in whole and healed and ready to face whatever you have to face to do this work.
Yeah. And I will add specifically for body types. for the defenders is because we will push our bodies. There's like, it's weird to be a body type when like we can sort of cut ourselves off, particularly point one can like cut ourselves off from our bodies or suppress what's happening in our bodies. And then even, oh, so it's good for me to go walking. I'm going to walk so hard. It's like, we really have to become friends with our bodies and decide we're going to love them. There's some really interesting research around this concept called weathering, that particularly what they find in Black and brown and poor communities is that literally our neurons are worn down.
Yeah.
Which is why we have that's why we have worse birthing outcomes, higher maternal morbidity and mortality and higher morbidity and mortality for our babies, because literally our bodies are worn by the impact of racism and stress. And so this is a life or death issue. If you are also then going to take on social change work, you have, because if you're not there anymore, you're not there anymore. You can't do the work.
That is so true.
So I've learned that the hard way. That I've learned that the hard way.
Yes.
And so I'm super passionate about it.
And
so
this, to what Micky is speaking to, your body will tell you. Your body will give you all kinds of clues. Body types, you will start to get sick. You'll be catching colds more often. Your joints will start to get achy. Your back will start to bother you. All of a sudden you'll have this, pain in your neck that you just can't quite get rid of. Your body is speaking to you and it's telling you what is not healed. You have to explore, and you can explore where the pain is, and you'll find the emotional, psychological wound, and it may have gotten triggered by the work. So
that's right.
Taking care of yourself is so important in this work.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question from Phoenix and Thrive. I know them. Very happy that Phoenix and Thrive is here. And Phoenix and Thrive says, I like the description of energy centers as a way to group 3 of the types together. Would you say it's better to build a team with someone from each of the 9 points, or at least one from each center?
It does not depend upon really the energy of just the center or the point. The most important thing is that whatever people you are working with, that they have, that they are working from an average to average healthy level. It's about something that we call in the Enneagram called the levels of development. People ask me questions similar to that all the time, like what 2 types are best together to get married? Well,
yes,
it doesn't make any difference. The people just need to be healthy. Why? Because we have access to all 9 of those energies, and we can remember, we can slide into the energy of our wings or the energy of our growth or stress points. So we've got that in ourselves. If you have several people, you're able to slide into the different types and centers. This is so important. It doesn't matter what your Enneagram number is, your 3 centers need to be aligned. So you have to pay attention. You bring all 3 centers into the work. If you come up with an idea, then filter it through your heart. How does it feel? And then let your gut kick in and tell you this is the right thing to do. So it's important for the people that are doing the work that you align your centers. So you do centers work to make sure that all 3 of your centers are online. And then you make sure that you're doing your inner work to have a healthy level of functionality within your particular Enneagram energy. And you have access to so many other energies. If you've got 3 people and you're all different types, you've brought in all kinds of energies from the centers and the different points.
Yeah, yeah. It is funny. People always have those questions about who I should date or marry, and how do I use this, maybe in my community organizing or my business, and it all comes back to that this is your work, right? Like, just after working with some sevens, and I love sevens, but there were some particular things that were coming up, particularly in movement work, where we would rub each other the wrong way. And so I had to start coming to my seven colleagues when we would work together and be like, so I know this is my stuff. I ask a lot of questions because I want details, because I want to get this done right. I know that my questions can feel like judgment, or like I'm asking for too much from you. We do this in a way, how can I ask my questions and you feel like I trust you, and like you have room to dream? And so it was about me trying to come to that colleague and work with them in a particular way, not trying to control who the colleagues were or how they acted, right? It did bring me back to my own work. And I think as long as you're doing that, you're going to be successful with whoever the people are.
And I would add one thing to that, Micky, and I know you know this because I see how you operate. Try to stay as much as possible in a place of kindness.
Yeah.
Just stay in a space of kindness.
Yeah.
And that's for every point on the Enneagram. Ask yourself, before you speak, even if you have to say something that may be hard to hear, ask yourself, have I taken the time to see if I can speak these words with love? And that makes all the difference in the world. I have to tell you, I've walked into rooms where there were 50 angry white men looking at me in corporate, wondering what the heck I was doing there to talk to them about some thing called the Enneagram and diversity. And by the time we were through, I had a few friends in the room. I had some people who were defending me when other people were trying to actually attack me. But the secret superpower of all of us is love, and it is kindness, and it is trying to see the good that is in every human being. We may not always be able to bring it out of them, but if we approach everyone from the place of the goodness that resides in all of us, speak to people kindly, with love and respect, and you may not be getting that back. You don't want to mirror what you're getting back from that person, but make sure that you stay in that space. And please remember, the angry brain and the rational brain do not operate together. So as soon as we get triggered and angry, give it up. It's just going to be ugly. It's just going to be ugly. So ask yourself before the words come out of your mouth, is it kind? Is it true? Is it loving? Does it need to be said? Be said.
Yeah. I have a note on my desk that says, "Get me."
What does it say? You froze for a moment.
It says, "Say what you mean what you say, and don't say it mean."
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's a helpful reminder for me. Okay, so we have another question. This one, though, we definitely don't have time to go into all of it, so I'm going to read it as is. If you can give maybe an overall kind of answer to it, okay? Because they're asking in their particularity, but we can't do all the points. So from Roxanne, it says, "What are the stress points of the types of the points, and more importantly, how do we move away from the stress points and more towards integration? For example, as a 6, I'm known to go into 3 and increase productivity in times within the Enneagram to instead move in the direction of integration."
Okay, so I have a generic answer for all of the types, and I've found that this works really, really well. Let's be real. When things get tough, we're going to go towards the stress point. Okay, you're not growing when you get stressed. There is a stress response that we have. But what we tend to forget is that the line of the stress point has a high and a low as well. And if you find yourself, remember, we go from where we are at our own point to that same space on the stress point or on the line of growth. So if you find yourself on the low side of your stress point, you use it as a springboard. In other words, pull yourself up to a higher space on the stress point, and then you can actually like trampoline over to your growth point. Example, as a 1, I told you I have these really ugly pity parties, but while I'm down there on the floor, I may look under the bed and see, well, that's a little messy. Well, why is this bed not the way it is? And the next thing you know, I've gotten up and I'm rearranging the room. My creativity, and then I turn on some music, and so I get myself kind of, I'm in 4, but I'm going to use that 4 to fuel my energy, my creativity, and to pull myself up to the higher side of 4. Once I pull myself up to the higher side of 4, oh, you can find me in 7. I'm doing something ridiculous, like dancing to Taylor Swift saying, "Shake It Off." Totally ridiculous, but I'm laughing at myself at that point. So use the stress point as actual fuel. I mean, I tell people, get out the book if you need to and look at what's down here at the bottom of my stress point. Well, what's the high side of this point? How can I get myself to the high side of this point? If you can get to the high side of that point, then you are taking steps towards getting to your line towards growth.
Well, you've seen my springboard. You've seen the boots that I dance in.
Yeah, yours is literal. Yes. Yeah, I tried, Micky. I failed. Fell on my head. It was really kind of ugly.
No!
My husband took away all my 5-inch heels.
He said, "No more."
No
Okay,
more.
well, we'll still get a dance lesson in this year at the IEA conference. We're going to do it.
Right.
Okay, so we have some questions about like changing your number and that when we start to talk about kind of movement, because the Enneagram, unlike other kind of systems for understanding who you are that kind of puts you in one thing and then you're kind of there forever, the Enneagram is dynamic. There's movement within the symbol, and then so within the teaching, right? And so the question disappeared, but the person was talking about, I get confused between 3 and 7, which has been coming up for me a lot recently. We have a question from Nancy that says, I was an 8 due to my conditioning to produce and earn my worth as a BIPOC woman. I'm now a 7. I believe that I was shifted to my core as I matured and hit my 50s, right? So there's those questions around, have I shifted? Am I still discerning between 2 numbers? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
All right. So and I will say this is my personal opinion and belief. There are Enneagram practitioners who agree with me, and I'm sure there's some that don't. I believe you're born with your type, and then nature and nurture sets in, and then things happen. your object relations, you begin to look at that. You look at that parental overlay. You look at major, even pain points or incidents in your life. So you see the formation of the personality. By the time you are, I would say 8, 9, 10, that range right there, that person,
Yeah.
that Enneagram energy is pretty spot on. And it is going to be that core point for the rest of your life. This is where people get confused. As you get older, you actually have had some life experiences, and you've possibly even had some therapy, and you've learned methodologies of behavior modification. So you've learned to change some of your behaviors. For instance, if you're an angry 8 and you've cussed out your boss 3 or 4 times in your 20s, by the time you get to your 30s, you realize you need to keep a job. You stop doing that, okay? That doesn't mean that you don't still have that anger in you. If you are a self-righteous one and you have told off your roommates, and you've had to change apartments 5 or 6 times, you get tired of that, you stop telling off your roommate. Behavior modification. That doesn't mean you're not still thinking, oh my gosh, you are such a slob. I don't know how I can live with you. On and on and on, okay? People take behavior modification and actually wisdom and maturity as a sort of, it's a pass to change your type. It's not, because what's your core is at your core. That's one of the reasons that we tell people that when you are trying to find your type, go back to a younger version of yourself. What would you have done when you were a 20-something? Not what you would do now because you're 50-something and you know better. So you have to look at sort of the raw instinctual response that is there, because it's still there, but you know better. You've made peace with it. You've learned that your inner critic is, and we all have one, but you've learned that it can get you in trouble. And you've learned how to move through the world. Hopefully with age comes some wisdom and some kinder and gentler ways of being in the world. But that does not mean your type has changed. It doesn't change. If you look at the behaviors at the higher levels of development, you may see very clearly that that is aligned with the same Enneagram point that it was when you were 20-something.
Yeah. I think that's helpful. Yeah. And I think just as people do more work, because I think also there's confusion, and maybe you could speak to this, is people think Enneagram work is reading Enneagram books.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, no, that's not the work.
No. No.
And so like actually starting to understand your true self or your essence, really getting in, like doing something in community, other folks, or, talking about it with your therapist or doing some somatic work or whatever. There are like, the work is not the learning, like that can be part of it, but just getting information about these ideas is not the same as processing them. Something as simple as, a repeating questions exercise where you're going deeper and deeper with what comes out when someone asks you a question that kind of goes for your type. Like that kind of work is what starts to move you into a place of deeper understanding, of really exploring this map you now have of who you are. And I think maybe that's where people get confused. I don't know. What have you seen?
Well, Micky, you cannot do your Enneagram work or any inner work in a bubble, because if the only person that you're talking to is you, then somehow you're not getting any objective input. So trying to do inner work totally by going in and not coming back out to sort of try out what you're experiencing. And what you were describing is what happens when people's centers aren't aligned. They'll take all of this knowledge in here, but it has not really shifted their hearts or opened their hearts. It's not, they're not testing whether or not it rings true in their gut, you know? So Enneagram work is meant to come, you go in, but you come back out. And this is what many people fail to understand. Yes, go in, touch your own soul, do your own time in meditation, in prayer, in whatever it is that takes you in and allows you to connect to your authentic self, not some version of yourself. That's another one of my little pet peeves, talking about becoming better versions. Don't become a version, become your authentic self. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to unfold the layers to find who you really are, who you were created to be, going back to a state and a place of innocence and purity where love leads. If love is leading, then you are standing in your authentic power. If fear is leading, if anger is leading, if shame is leading, if blame is leading, if anxiety is leading, then you are not standing in your authentic power, your authentic self. So yes, go in, but find you and bring yourself back out into the world. And I guarantee you, people will notice something has shifted.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And most of us have to circle around the Enneagram for several years before we even get close to going. You know, I know it has taken me years to really do the work, and it's taken some crises as well to do the work, and that has really helped me get serious about it. And it has changed my life, and people really do not, it's not just that my actions are different. Like, I look different. People can see it on me, you know, because the work has really changed me to my core and helped me come back to myself. So,
Well, I agree with that.
okay. Sorry, go
And
ahead, Dr. E.
we're running out, we're out of time, but I want to say, if you are doing your Enneagram work, and all these years later, I'm still doing it on a daily basis and finding things in myself that, you know, darn it, I thought I was done with that. But we have a tendency, once we find the Enneagram, to want the people that we love to find it too. And so we read the book, and then we take the book and we beat everybody we love over the head with it. And we don't understand why they don't get on the Enneagram train. And I just want my last words about this to be that people will come to the Enneagram when they see the change in you. When you have become the change that you were looking for in the world, then people will look around and say, what happened? I have a very different experience of you. And then at that point, you might just slip them a book. And if you slip them a book, slip them mine.
Yeah, exactly. Get this one.
No justice,
So,
no peace.
that's right. Now, as we wrap, we have a question from the audience about how people can learn more about the Enneagram. What resources would you recommend, and professionals?
Okay. I'll make it very simple. I make it easy for people because that's always the wrap-up question. Go to DeborahEgerton.com. Deborah is spelled Deborah. Egerton, EGERTON.com. And if you go to my website, I've got all the resources in the world for you. So you can learn about the Enneagram, you can take an Enneagram quiz, you can see other things where I'm teaching the Enneagram, you can see teachers, classes, courses, all kinds of things that you can tap into. one of the main things that I am very careful about is recognizing that when people are serious about their Enneagram journey, you want to make sure that they're getting good information. So I don't think of the Enneagram as a party game. I think of it as something that is life-changing, you know, and the main thing is it'll wake you up, and we need for everyone to wake up if it's at all possible. So yeah,
that's right. Well, again, everybody pick up No Justice, No Peace, a transformative journey of social justice, anti-racism, and healing through the power of the Enneagram. Books are sold, and can they buy it directly from your website, or do they have to go somewhere else?
No, Amazon.
Okay.
It's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere that books are sold. It's in bookstores.
Okay.
And there probably is a link on my website, but since I don't maintain the website, I can't even answer that question.
You're like, I have people. Yes. Are you still running cohorts of your training program, or where are you with that?
Yes, I'm still running cohorts. I take applications for people who want to come onto the cohort because I like to have a good, rich mix of diversity within the cohort. And the cohorts now are running 3 months. We have a live come together in the beginning, and then we work virtually online, and then we have a sort of it's a certification process. So people actually get IEA certification for the Enneagram, and I call it idea work: inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism. So it's particularly good for people who are in organizations where they need to show that they've done some type of work in diversity, and they get a credential, and they actually have to do the work to get the credential. You don't automatically get the credential just because you came. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, that could be a really great resource for folks who are ready to take that next step and to use it professionally as well. So, Dr. E, thank you so much for your time tonight, for sharing just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more in the book. There's so much on your website. You have a whole library essentially on your website. You have videos, you have articles. I mean, just so many resources for people to check out. So y'all go check that out, and, keep up with all the things Dr. E is doing. I feel like you are always on the go and always teaching somewhere, online, in person. You can really catch her all over the place. So thank you so much for being here and being with me. You're always amazing, and I cannot wait to hug your neck this summer at the IEA conference.
I know, that's going to be so wonderful. Yeah. Don't forget to bring your shoes. I want my dance lesson.
We will definitely do that. So everyone, we hope you have a great night. Like I always say, Yang. We will see you later. Good night.
Good night.